we're live.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and after
good news
a short
for
delay,
you.
because
Very short delay.
obviously we have to delay it because it takes a
Right.
little while to get warmed up, didn't it?
Yeah, if you
You know
say we're
this.
live too soon, then people don't hear that we're live.
True.
Yeah,
but
and they won't know.
Well,
So
we
this is
are
very
live.
important.
Are we
we?
live?
We're live.
Well, are we though? Are we really live? Or...
We are now. By now, it's been like 34 seconds. Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
did you
dear.
know that this is Literary Roadhouse, where it's one short story once a week? And I'm Andy.
I'm Anise.
And I'm Gerald.
Okay.
This week, for some reason we read The Afterlife by Jonathan
chose it.
Lethem.
That's why.
This is why you shouldn't let me choose these, honestly. No, I mean, who knows? Maybe we liked it. Let's stay tuned. Don't stop listening now.
And we have to be careful because we don't know who's listening.
Listen, I'll be careful and polite and respectful as always ish. However, I gave this the good college try. I read his interview about it. I read some other analysis about it. I looked into like what are the typical themes he's been exploring in his more recent work, like trying to wrap my head around it. I had my boyfriend read it and see if he got anything out of it. I discussed it with him. Give it the old college try. So I'm pretty confident on where I've landed.
Well, hey, I'm going to summarize this.
Yeah.
Okay, why not?
This guy with an initial R, that's his name, R. He's a sculptor. He's on a bus, and the bus pulls into the afterlife, which is a big empty building. There's one giant room with a bunch of other giant rooms. They're smaller than the giant room, but still pretty giant off of it. And then people keep pouring in. Also, like, he makes these stupid sculptures that are like everyday objects made bigger and then covered in a gray-green oatmeal. So, like, he's dumb. And then, like, he wanders around this empty room for a while and starts making fun of the Avengers because this one guy he bumps into hadn't seen the second Avengers movie. And, like, that's kind of really the first Avengers movie ends on kind of a disappointing cliffhanger. You really need the second half of that movie to make sense of it. And he's overly critical of that guy because he's a jerk. And then eventually he falls into a pool because too many people show up. And then he wakes up on a bus going to the afterlife again. Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Okay.
Spooky.
So, I don't even know where to start. Actually, there's a lot of other little things in there that happen that maybe we should just hit. Like, so what happens? Some random teenager touches his knee, then disappears into a crowd. There's the poet guy. Well, presumed poet turned out to not be a poet guy. There's the woman in the sari who's like, I feel bad for you Westerners. You must be so confused by all this. Then he finds what could be a mini bar. And he's like, ooh, yay, finally something that I can like do my sculptor stuff to. And then it kind of sucks. And then the pools are really like these sort of trenches that at first you can like see and avoid, but then later they're like unavoidable. You're falling into it by the time you realize it's happened and you're on another one. Also, he gets little fragments of conversation out of context that are just kind of like zany and all over the place or boring. They run the gamut from boring to zany. And also, at some point, he realizes, oh, there's people speaking other languages here. I didn't even realize that for a while. I'm a little embarrassed about that. And at some point, also, he thinks to himself, somebody told me what this was all about, but I wasn't listening. Maybe I should have. And then after he's in the pool, he ends up again on the bus. And also remember when he was on the bus, he wasn't paying attention to what was happening outside the bus on the entire ride. I feel like all those things are clues, right? In an otherwise kind of empty-ish feeling story. Which, I mean, effective writing, it's an empty room and the story really makes you get that hollow, empty feeling. I'm not being snarky, though. I'm not being snarky. Like, I'm being genuine there. Like, that's like a thing. Like, putting you in that, making you feel that, being like, okay, what? Like, it's very disorienting, right? Like, you're just like, and what now? Which is the same thing that R is feeling throughout the entire story. And that takes some skill to get across to the reader, where the reader's like, okay. Which is also how he is for most of this. He's like, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, having a beard and glasses does not a poet make. Hey, Andy. it's kind of a weird sort of assumption to make. There's a beard with guy with a beard and glasses, therefore he's a poet.
I think it's a joke.
Well, right. Let me let me go to my summary, because I hate stories that end up, and then he woke up and it was all a dream, even when they're a foreshadowing dream. And ooh, he dreamt about these big doors, and ooh, he's turned up and there's big doors. No, I don't like that. I don't like the fact that he's used R for the guy's name. I presume it's a guy. I don't know.
It's
It's a guy.
male pronouns.
Yeah. Because why? I mean, they used to do this in Victorian times or something, but not now. What's the point? Call him R2D2 or something. I don't know. I didn't like that. I did quite like this sort of the concept that everything was quite ephemeral, so that as soon as he started to think about something, that something appeared. So, for instance, he began to wonder whether he'd find anyone he knew. Even as he registered thought, he understood that this was a preoccupation among many of those roaming the floor. So, and that kept happening, that he kept sort of thinking about something, and that's what's happening. And when he first went into the side room, which was empty, and he said, this is empty. I wonder where all the people are. And then all the people were there. So there's, I don't know if there's something going on there that was sort of interesting. And that's about it, really.
Well, I think for me that would have been interesting if it did anything else with it, but then it didn't, and then it was stupid.
Oh, and dissing the Avengers movie. No.
Yeah, that's Avengers spend blame.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so the Avengers may not be the the most critically acclaimed literary genius piece of filmmaking ever, but a lot of people like it, and it's escapism and good fun. So leave Avengers alone.
Well, what actually bothered me the most about the Avengers thing was, so basically, so he has this moment where he regrets not really being a part of that bigger cultural, sort of like touch point, right? Everyone is talking about this except him. I think he's regretting the wrong thing here. I don't think you need to regret not giving like a crap about the Avengers. If you don't want to get into the Avengers, you don't have to get into the Avengers. If you want to tune into different kind of content and discuss it with people like you because you find it more thrilling, that's fine. It's the snobbery that goes with it, which is what he should be regretting. You shouldn't be regretting not liking the Avengers. You don't have to like anything you don't want to like. You should be regretting being a snob about it. Like, that difference is key to me. Like, you're regretting the wrong thing here, buddy. And I guess those things are close. He's like, maybe if I was less of a snob, I could have been a part of something with my fellow, man beside me. So like, they're not too far from each other, but that slight difference matters.
He's regretting it very snobbily, right?
Yes.
Yes. Only the Avengers is base enough to have the broad appeal to fit in with these people.
Right. Exactly. Like, maybe I should have been fitting in with the riffraff, when it's like, no, the problem is the word riffraff in your mind. You know what I mean? Like, not, yeah. That's the problem here. Anyway.
I should have fitted in with the riffraff.
Yeah. I regret not, talking to them more. Those low-minded people. Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So one of the things that kept sort of just like, okay, so if you go through the story, there's sort of a parallel in what happens and if you want there to be, right? The story is so open, you can kind of start impugning anything you want onto it, which was becoming apparent in my conversation with my boyfriend, where it's like, well, it could also be this. And I'm like, yeah, you can pretty much support almost any theory because there's so little there, right? So, but one of them that I think is a little bit more obvious, or like there's a parallel here where it's, you arrive into your life. Just on instinct, you kind of know I'm alive, right? Or in this case, I'm dead. And you just sort of move forward instinctually. Everyone's just moving, exploring, and then trying to find meaning to things. But this guy in particular, he is extremely myopic. So he doesn't really pay attention to the scenery outside of the bus. He doesn't really pay attention to people speaking other languages around him. He's just sort of moving, putting one foot before the other. And things are kind of a series of disappointments for him, right? Like he tries to talk to, he gets excited, he thinks there's a poet, and then is quickly disappointed by it. He gets excited by this minibar, is quickly disappointed by it. You avoid death, right? If the trench represents death, do we all agree with that? That the trenches that you fall into represent death, right? You avoid it, but eventually you're going to fall into one. And then there's like this reincarnation thing that's hinted at in a few places where you're just going to keep cycling through this over and over again. And the woman in the sari says, this must be hard for you Westerners, hinting at this reincarnation thing, except it's like not really reincarnation because you're not going back to the real world, the material world. Anyway, point is, okay, let's say that's what it is. You have a very myopic character who paid attention to nothing, shuffling about, constantly being disappointed, not making do with anything, and then dying, rinse and repeat. There's a little bit of a preachy thing there, which is a bit of like a wake up sheeple. Don't be like this guy. Which is like when I started to feel that. Like I started to feel like, right, like this isn't someone you're supposed to aspire to be like. It's someone that you're supposed to learn a lesson from, right? Like, did you guys get that sort of feeling as well as you were reading? It's not be like R. It's don't be like R. Not because he's a terrible person, but just, you know, he isn't really doing this afterlife thing very well. He probably didn't do the life thing very well. Are you doing the life thing well, reader? And it's just like, if you're going to give me this kind of theme, you got to make it more interesting. Like, that's basically my takeaway. Like, I don't hate the idea you're going for, but man, that was a lot of to get there.
Yeah,
that bothered me.
And I think if that was the case, then I would have liked a little bit more sort of realization from him that he had been acting a jerk during his lifetime, and maybe it's just a little bit sort of cleverer, and by showing his jerkiness in the afterlife, then we sort of impugn and judge that he was like that in the real life as well. So I can see that.
Yeah. But okay. But the reading of it, the tone of the story, also like the tone of the writing and reading of it also felt like very pretentious and stupid, like a stupid jerk pretentious thing. You know, something stupid jerks write when they're trying to be pretentious. The stupid jerk pretentious thing.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd agree that the tone necessarily was that, but in the interview he did say this came to him in a lucid dream, which I feel you got to be careful with those. Sometimes great stuff comes from it, and sometimes, like, you know how like one of the most boring things someone can tell you is what they dreamed of last night? Like you're like, I'm sure this was so fascinating to you, but I am bored to tears. And I think a little bit like, because that's what I'm saying. Like R is written in a way where he just, you don't like or dislike him, right? But you can recognize his flaws. You dislike him. I didn't dislike him necessarily. It's like, okay, you're kind of a myopic dude who just is a little snobby or whatever. You're a sculptor. And you're just not supposed to be like him, and that's it. Okay. But the story is sort of like him, isn't it? Like,
right. The story is like, that's,
R. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to put your finger on it. But in the interview with the author, he talks about, so the interviewer asks, okay, well, why is he a sculptor? And why is the kind of sculpting that he does is he takes common everyday objects and he makes them a bit unfamiliar and unusable, right? So one of the examples was like a music stand, which is no longer something that can hold music for somebody to read, like music sheets. So then the author starts talking about defamiliarization. And, you know, he says, you know, and if I were to flatter myself, I would say that the story is doing that same thing, a defamiliarization, which the more I thought about it, it made me like, so what, if you're saying that the story itself is going through a process of defamiliarization, what am I being, what is it the concept of a story that you're making me no longer familiar with? Because if so, mission accomplished, but to what end? You know, like you did it.
You're right. This does not feel like a story.
Yeah, like you're true. And like that could be a fun experiment. I'm not knocking the idea of doing that, but it needs to feel like, you know what I mean? Like it needs to feel like it's still doing something, even if that is the clever trick. That clever trick needs to perform, right? Like, yeah. The things that bothered me about this was like, okay, let me go with you on this. Or is the defamiliarization the whole thing that's happening to R? Is it R's experience through the story? In which case, of course, you put him in a setting that feels kind of familiar, but ultimately is not, and is like nothing on Earth. So of course that's defamiliar. Then that's too easy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose he kind of has a difficulty describing things, because it seems like as soon as he describes something, it changes, and that's why I sort of bring up the sort of ephemera side of it. That it's intangible. There's it's like he, as soon as he puts something down on paper, it changes. As soon as somebody turns up, they disappear, and so it. But I don't know. Then you, the only thing you have to hang the story on is the main character, who's also a bit empty, really. He was a, I don't know. I think the comment about whenever he was back on Earth, whenever he went back on Earth, sorry, whenever he was not in the afterlife, wherever he used to go, he used to observe pieces of ordinary sort of engineering, ordinary sort of household stuff, and admire their sculptural aesthetic. So there's sort of that thing, but it's like he's almost a transparent character too.
And to be fair, that's what I was saying. One of the things that I can credit to the author, that's hard to do. I think it's extremely hard to write in this way where the thing that you put down on paper immediately vanishes. It's not how we tend to write or even speak or live. It's really, really hard to resist the need to give something a purpose, to give something an endpoint, to give something some traction. So I can't imagine the amount of editing it took to be like, no, this is taking too firm of a shape, yank it back out. Like, to create that effect and to create it successfully is in and of itself a skill. But again, you got to do something with it now, right? Because if the whole thing is just to disorient me, you did that. But now why did I go through this? What am I supposed to? Yeah. Like, what is it? Yeah. Disorientation for the sake of disorientation is like, okay, I guess, thank you for keeping it short, ish. Short-ish.
Yeah. And I think, you can either have, or you could not either. There's not a choice. You can have a story that's interesting and the narrative is interesting and takes you along as the story develops, or you can have a story, or there's a possibility of a story that looks quite bland on the surface, but there's a lot of subtext, a lot of stuff under the surface. And you sort of start digging and you find something and you think, oh, that's it. And then the further you dig, the more you get from it. But this ain't either of those. It's just sort of nothing.
You know what's kind of interesting? Like we've had stories where like the characters were really blank and pointless. Like, I'm feeling very negative, so I'm going to continue to use negative words because I don't like this story. But we've had stories with like blank characters that weren't the point of the exercise. That it wasn't about who this character was that the story was written. And we know a lot more about R as a character than we know about a lot of those, and he still feels quite emptier, right? So that is kind of a neat trick. While making him a person, we still don't invest a lot into him or into identifying with him.
Which I think takes me back to the whole, like, is the point of this sort of like that wake up sheeple kind of thing? Like, R is, even as I attach like facts to him, he doesn't matter. Don't be a person who doesn't matter. Like, if that's the thing, I kind of hate it. Like, like, that can't be it. Like, that's it. No, this was like, it's too, I don't know. It's like just missing something to like make that feel satisfying. Like, it just feels like, is that it? Like, man.
Yeah, and I think if that was it, he could have made the character in before the afterlife. He could have made the character even a little more bland. But he made him a sculptor, and he's had some good commissions and some well rated sculptures. So this is sort of it's sort of kind of interesting side of the character, but actually it's sort of, again, it's neither one thing nor the other. It's not an interesting enough character. You just think, oh, he was a sculptor and he did this and covered strange objects with oatmeal, and you think, well, that's interesting, but that was it. We know very little about his real life other than that.
And that might be the point, right? That his life's very empty. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what he's sculpting, right? It's that oatmeal-ish polymer that he puts on things that makes it kind of look fleshy and organic. He takes something angular and he gets rid of those angles. Okay. Are we supposed to think that's a cool concept, not a cool concept, or neither? And I think it's neither. The story doesn't pull you in any direction. And and as a reader, without actually seeing it, I don't know if I think this is cool or not. The thing that's painted in my mind is neither cool nor uncool. It just is, like everything else in the story, which again is a neat trick. I think it's really hard to write without a point of view. So to have a story that is so insistent on not having a point of view and is doing something to the reader is skillful, but it's just, okay, now why? Which is what I keep coming back to, the why.
Why? Yeah, I think by making your character a sculptor and describing the sculptures he made, it's a very dangerous thing, because to a lot of people, making things big so that you can't recognize what they are and covering them in stuff that looks like oatmeal is just the worst of art to some people. Especially if you can't see it, it's just the worst. It's the pile of bricks or the pile of tires, and what's it supposed to mean, and what's this. And if you just describe, this is what someone made, you're in danger of alienating a lot of readers who just think, well, maybe that's the point. You see, maybe that's the point.
Maybe that's the point. But that's funny, Gerald, that you're just like describing something as a gray, blue, or gray green oatmeal monstrosity polymer thing is the worst kind of art, and you will alienate. And I'm here like, it's neither good nor bad. Like, I don't, until I see it, I can't judge it. Like, for me, it's not necessarily.
Some people would call it the worst.
They would. Some people would, but I guess what I'm saying is, I agree with you. It's definitely not good. It's not written in a way to make me be like, "Ooh, what an interesting concept." No, for sure not. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, because it could have dealt more on like, oh, and this is, why he did it, and these were the claims that he made about the world through his art. And it's just like, nah, I slapped some oatmeal on stuff.
Yep. Yeah, he has no point of view. The story has no point of view. And I think that is the take. That's why I keep going to the wake up sheeple thing, which is like, live with purpose. Don't be just like this dude who even his art, he's an artist, and even his art feels empty and pointless. Like, that is the opposite of what art should be. His point of view should be coming across at all times, especially as an artist, which is the kind of people that we think are the most supercharged with opinions and points of views, right? So yeah, that's why I keep thinking it's a wake up sheeple story. And it's like, no. There's a lot of wake up sheeple stories, and this one's just...
No, I think I'd rather stay asleep.
You hit the snooze button,
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe if there was like some other character who was able to take this setting that's extremely disorienting and empty, and peripherally, even if R like sucks at like having any kind of inner world, right? Because somebody who has an inner light can kind of be put anywhere and find something there. And he can't find anything ever in anything, right? Like, that's the thing he's struggling with, even as a sculptor. He's somebody who is trained to like see things, right? Artists are supposed to see things in a different way. And he's not seeing this in any way that is interesting or informative for the reader, right? But imagine if there was a tertiary character who's doing this. The closest we get to that is the woman in the sari, right? Somebody who clearly seems to be having some purpose here. So that's the only clue we have where like the reason this feels empty is because it's something that is inside R. It's not external, it's internal. Okay. Got it.
And is the thing about giving him him an initial, because there's no clue for us that is how people in this world are referred to, because it would be pretty boring to just have 26 names. So is the point of that to just give you, because they could have, we've read stories where the main character and narrator hasn't been named at all, so he could have done that, but by giving him an initial, maybe it's just a little, a little glint of normality, a little glimpse of humanity, but not enough to make it interesting. So he's not a Rupert or a Roland or anything like that. It's just which is sort of interesting, but not.
Right. It's enough of a name to let us know he's a person with a name, but not enough of a name for us to care.
Yes.
But actually, it's a missed opportunity. If the whole idea is to make him sort of like just like some dude who just like doesn't really pay attention to anything, it's just kind of plodding through life on instinct and not really doing anything with it, then his name should have been John. Not to knock Johns, but John Doe, right? Like that is the filler name that we tend to give men in Western society. Then you should have named him John, right? Not because the name John sucks. I'm not knocking John. I'm just saying that's the filler name that we tend to have. Make him John then. Now it's even emptier.
Right.
It feels even more. None of this matters.
None of this matters. And in that case, maybe by shining a light on somebody that has no effect on life and has, has missed out on a lot of things, is that? Are we? I don't know if we're supposed to think, as you said, Annie, is that this is wake up sheeple and this is what life could be like, and I could pass into the beyond or whatever. Without having a major effect on life, then it doesn't do that for me. Because I'm too busy trying to work out what the story is about.
Which is which is a little funny, because there's that one criticism about like, you Westerners are going to have a hard time with this. And part of what makes R have a hard time with it is, even though he sucks at seeing things and he can't give things purpose, he's still looking for purpose. There's like a weird blindness here where it's not that he doesn't want a purpose, he's just incapable of seeing it or devising one. So it's funny to have us, a bunch of Westerners, be like, what is the purpose of this story? Like, I get there's like a funny irony thing going on here. We're here like, we demand a purpose. However, the difference here is R has an entire life, people around him, a whole setting within which to do that, and we're trying to like squeeze it from a story that is at all times resisting to be squeezed, right? Like, we're trying to get meaning from something that was created in such a way to deny us that meaning. So then to have it be like, you failed to get meaning, is like, okay, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
right, yeah. He successfully made a reading experience that feels like trying to squeeze meaning from a stone. Yes. But I don't know that that's particularly worthy. Masterfully done, and I don't care.
And
that's kind of what I keep going back to. Like, well done. I don't care.
It's kind of strange that we've been talking getting on for 29 minutes about this story of less than 3,000 words. So that's something.
You know what it kind of reminds me of, and here's a reference I don't think you guys are familiar with. So I'm going to keep talking though, right? This is I'm on this show. You guys made the mistake of having me.
We've said that many a time. No.
One of the Joe Abercrombie's novels that I read, The First Law, has this character who pulls guard duty for a Senate meeting, right? So he's just a guard at the Senate meeting, and he's a complete fop, and he's got no interest in the political proceedings. And so, like, they're discussing important things to the plot of the story, and he doesn't care. And the whole chapter where he's the point of view character just feels really tedious and boring because it's supposed to. But, like, this was the whole short story of that, right? Like, as one tiny chapter in a book about barbarians doing fightings, like, that's fun. But here's the short story. Like, hey, this is about how meaning is hard to find, and it's going to make you feel meaningless. And it's like, okay, good.
And also the danger is if you can't find the meaning of the story, or you're struggling to find the meaning of the story, then you start to feel a bit stupid, because you think, well, there must be more to the story than this. There must be something I'm not seeing. What am I not seeing? And that's not a good thing to do. You have to give some little nugget, something for the reader to go, aha, I saw what you did there, writer. And because each time you dig and you dig up another little nugget of meaning.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good way to keep your readers invested in your story. But I think, like we said, this is less than 3,000 words. When you're keeping something kind of short, you can break a lot of those kind of conventions and those best practices to prove a different point. However, you still need to get to that point, right? Like, I don't mind that he's making something disorienting when it's this short. That feels this empty. That feels this bewildering. That feels unfamiliar. That is the experiment, the thing that he is experimenting with and pulling off successfully. Sure, you kept it short enough. Don't do this to me in a 300-page novel. I will die, right? But like, I won't finish it. But like something like this, yeah, this is exactly the format where you can experiment with those things. But you need to still find some way to not make the reader at the end not care. Even if throughout the entire thing you felt disoriented, then that disorientation should still feel at the end some kind of like payoff, some kind of, yeah. So anyway, I don't have much more to say. I've gotten through all my notes. I've said what I wanted to say, which was, I think I see it. I hear you. I read your interview, and I just, yeah. We'll say this. The author, very smart. And the editing to create that effect, very effective. It worked. Yeah.
It did work.
Yeah.
Good job doing something that wasn't worth doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, the irony of like ours moving through this whole thing myopically, trying to find a meaning and missing it. We're going through this possibly myopically. I don't know. I feel like I've done enough research to try to like hear from, the horse's mouth, so to say. Yeah, I tried.
It's a bit like digging a hole and then filling it in again. So you could admire the way somebody digs a hole, and that's a great hole, and then it's filled in again, and afterwards you think, well, nothing's changed. I feel nothing. So,
yes, nothing has changed. That's exactly what it is.
Right. This is quality digging. Good job, Phil.
Good job.
Yes.
Really nice.
Let's all move on with our lives now.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we ready to rate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, why bother? Yes. What's the point?
So disoriented.
No, I'm just going to take my rating and put it into a hanger well, not quite a hanger, because the ceiling's flat and just grid-like and translucent squares. And so my rating's in that building somewhere. Just go find it.
We'll give it a null rating. There's just nothing.
Do you remember?
I don't know. I think I can't. 3. It was well written, and there were sentences and stuff, and that's okay. So 3.
That's a real low barrier for 3, Gerald.
Yeah.
I'm giving it a 3. I know. I'm giving it a 3, but I'm giving it a 3 because the effect that he wanted to put on the reader was well executed. The effect was done well. The defamiliarization totally happened. I think it's hard to write something that you can't pin down. The way that we live our lives is by pinning things down. We find patterns in things that have no pattern, right? So it's really talent. Like, it is like a talent to be like, nope, no pattern here. No, here you go. It's gone. You can't get anything from this. But like we've already said 1,000 times, there's no payoff at the end. So 3 in recognition of a rare skill. But
you know what? You know what this is like? This is like a top world famous chef, right? Who sets out to make a mud pie and It's probably the best mud pie anyone's ever made. But also, it's mud. So
The
who
mud
cares?
Mhm.
It right? Exquisitely crafted with care and love and attention to detail. And I don't want it ever. So I'm giving it a 2.
Yeah, I'm gonna change the title of this discussion to discussing an exquisitely crafted mud pie.
Yes, it's like one of those pictures that's made of the black dots, and if you stare at it hard enough, the slightly different coloured dots come out, and there's a number there. And we've stared at this collection of black dots, and there's nothing there. It's just black dots.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say one thing I did think of was this whole idea of somebody moving through their life aimlessly. There was an ex I broke up with where I was just like, literally, you were just waking up, breathing, eating, dying, and that's it. Like you need to like have some purpose or ambition, some inner spark, right? It's just, yeah. Anyway,
Good point.
yep. Okay. So we're no longer doing games because we don't hate ourselves. That was many years of hating ourselves. A little bit of background. The games, like none of us liked making them, right?
No.
But we kept doing it anyway, as if there was no other way to pick stories. Well, how are we gonna do it, guys? What if we just took turns? Oh my god.
Yes.
Genius. So we have stopped hating ourselves. So it's my turn to choose. Next week, we will be reading The Lost Performance of the High Priestess of the Temple of Horror by Carmen Maria Machado.
That sounds real cool.
Sounds awesome.
You know what that's probably not about? Wandering around in an empty building.
You know what? Let's not. You don't know that for sure. Let's not get our hopes up.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's got horror in the title, so that's got to be good.
Yeah. It was from that list I sent you guys of like the best horror stories available online. Yeah.
Thought it might be.
Yeah. I almost picked one that was about Black Friday and turning Black Friday, the consumer horror show, into like an actual like horror thing. But I was like, it's kind of been done before. But it might have been good. Maybe next time. I said to go with this one. Maybe next time. All right. So that's what we're reading. But before you go, seek us out in the vast internet and share with us your opinions on the story and Avengers Endgame. We'd like to know. Also, if this is the afterlife, I never want to die. So help us find the answer to eternal life by supporting us on patreon.com/literary roadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, share this podcaster with the teenagers who touch your knees and disappear into a crowd. Until next time, read a good story.
Very good.
All right.